Hi, my name is Vanessa Michelle. I'm currently applying for a work study position with Grace Space Hypnosis. I'm recording this from home. I do have two dogs and a cat. There might be some background noise. But I'm certainly going to just keep going. Um, I am applying for a position that would start October 1st and go for about 33 weeks, lasting till about May 2020. The question of how many hours am I available each week and what are my other obligations and commitments. So through conversation with Andrea, I have discussed being available to work 10 hours a week with Grace Space Hypnosis from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I currently do work a full-time job. I live in Los Angeles, California. My full-time job permits me permits me to work those later evening hours with you all at Grace Space. My last boss and my last job that I really want to highlight here for this interview is a position that I had when I was living in New York City, and it was an organization called Steps to End Family Violence. My former supervisor is a woman by the name of Marlene Santana, and I will provide her contact information in this email. So here's my cat who's wanting to get in this video. Uh-oh. Let's see. Excuse me, baby. Marlene as a boss. So Marlene is someone who has committed much of her work in the field of social work. She has a MSW, a licensed MSW. She's someone who leans in with curiosity, with non-judgment. Her spiritual practice is very important and integral into how she shows up on a daily basis. So infusing her religion and spirituality was a norm with her as a manager, and something frankly that I really appreciated and never felt intrusive, always felt warm. She in general is very warm, someone who also knows how to have fun. We played a lot as a team. I'll share more in this interview about the work that we were doing, but it was very heavy work, frankly, and so emotionally heavy. And so when we could, being able to really play, whether that meant having a socializing, like, body kind of experience. I remember one day we did a trapeze kind of yoga experience as a team, just for community building. We went to the beach as a team. So very much normalized just our humanity in our work. And then also, took the time to go to lunch in the midst of our heavy stress day, and then was extremely disciplined about the work itself, right? So our supervision was something that she always upheld consistently, our team meetings. So a real healthy balance between the discipline of the work labor and the breath away from work to build relationships with each other and to make sure we were really healthy and taking care of ourselves. Something that I could have done differently to enhance my relationship with Marlene. The word that came to me was being more present. I think one of my weaknesses is getting overwhelmed, is getting my hands in lots of little pieces, lots of different projects, and then not being as present to what's in front of me, whether that is a quick moment to connect with a coworker who passes by my office and my desk who just wants to say hi. I might have in the past just kind of shoo-shooed the moment or really been halfway present, halfway thinking about my email, right? Or maybe I got too focused on one project and my time management then suffered with other obligations and responsibilities I had. This particular job that I'm speaking on, I was at over 5 years ago. So I do think I have grown. Since that time, I was also not in a managerial position in any way myself at that particular job. Now, at this current job that I work at, I am a supervisor. I'm a director of a program. I have learned to step deeper into my leadership, step deeper into my boundary setting, and also take things not less seriously, but understand moments that I can take a breath and it not be anxiety leading, right? And so I think I have learned to be more balanced at this point in time, but I do believe Marlene would talk about where I was in my journey at that time. Another thing that I'll say is I am originally from New York, but currently live in Los Angeles, California, as I've said. And I was at that job, Steps to End Family Violence, for 2 years. And I knew at the time how absolutely special and sacred both that work was and that team was. I did not take for granted that it was possible I'd never find another team dynamic in that way. I believe that I will continue to have really incredible team dynamics, work cultures, but there's something so precious about that job and that team. And we talked about it. We were open about it when folks transitioned in and out of our workplace. We knew that this was special. And I think I underestimated how temporary sometimes things can feel. And if I were to go back in time, I would invest more in learning from my mentor. I'd invest more in spending more time with Marlene, again, more presence with her. That invitation to continue to get to know her outside of workplace has been there. And now 5+ years from that job, when I come back to New York, she is someone who I prioritize seeing. And I think that's something that I am grateful I was able to do differently in present day, right? And not take that relationship for granted. I feel very humbled and honored that it's a reciprocal relationship. Here's a puppy of mine. So all my animals want to hang out on this call. This is Marley. Let's see. The next question. When you talk to Marlene, what are some strengths she would highlight? I believe she would say I am very heart-centered. I speak with folks from a place of dignity, of witnessing their dignity, seeing them for their full selves. The work we did was supporting teen girls and women who were incarcerated at Rikers Island Jail in New York. Their incarceration was connected to some type of domestic violence or intimate partner violence. We were advocating along the life of these women fighting for their freedom, frankly. They were incarcerated, but not yet officially convicted. They were charged, often with very serious crimes, serious felonies, violent felonies oftentimes, and their charges, frankly, carried anywhere from 5 to 15 years of prison sentence. Many of our cases carried 15 years to life. Very serious moments of uncertainty, right? The women that we worked with on an individual one-on-one basis and on a group basis, when they worked with us, it was very precious, very private, very personal content. And so Marlene would be able to reflect back the way I showed up with any of the women I was connected to, from a sacred place, from a non-judgmental place, from a place where I understood I did not have the answers. Many of the women we supported were older than me. I was at this job in my early 20s, hadn't gone to graduate school, certainly had a college education, but approached the work from a humble place. Many of the women were mothers. Not only am I still not a mother today, I wasn't a mother then. Many of the needs and heartbreaks that many of the women were going through were things that I could not relate to from a personal experience perspective, but from an emotional connecting, was really able to hold space for them and build authentic connections. Those were many of the strengths that I had, and issues and needs that women had that I wasn't familiar with. Marlene would be able to say I invested the time to research within my heart, and from an academic perspective, social resource perspective, how can I do my best today? One of the quotes that a mentor shared with me that I've kept close to my way of work is, what is love asking of me today? And many of the things that we face from the moment we were going through metal detectors at the gates of the jail to walking through the different housing facilities, sometimes holding group in the center of a women's housing facility, or a one-on-one session in our office in the back of the jail. I never underestimated being intentional, right? And if I didn't know the answer, being honest about that. And then, like I said, doing my best. I started to already answer this next question on what was something for me to work on. And I'm actually losing my notes here. Yeah, something that I can improve on. Like I shared, since I think I was a little girl, have had to work on slowing down. I'm a fire energy. I am very, very much a playful person, a very hard worker. But sometimes I need to just chill out, right? I need to get more aligned within myself before I take a task on, more grounded before I make asks of other colleagues, and not overburden my plate, right? I think that sometimes I have said too many yeses, and then it hurts my ability to give my full self to what's in front of me. Again, some of those areas of growth have evolved since my time working with Marlene, but still challenges today. The question of, what do I think of Grace Space's core mission? So making hypnotherapy mainstream. I feel inspired by that mission. I feel curious about that mission. I recognize that if hypnotherapy was more mainstream, some of the challenges, some of the systems of oppression, some of our own internal pain and suffering would be transformed and transmuted. I think much of the last 8 years of my own life, maybe 10 years of my last personal and professional journey, has been about making the field of restorative justice more mainstream, thinking about taking that discipline, which has predominantly been looked at as a criminal justice or school-based tool, and in my current position of leadership as a director of a program, really, I would say, tackling like the constructed boundaries and knowing that restorative justice is a practice within ourselves, within our romantic relationships, our families, our organizational development, the way that we work with people in the workplace. And conversations I'm having today were not on the table 5 years ago. So I, from my current job, have seen when you set that intention, when you show up from a leaderful place, when you're speaking with other folks who don't quite understand the field or the vision, I have seen the needle move over 5 years. Oh, my cat. I've seen the needle move. And I actually know Grace from our college world. I went to Wagner College in Staten Island, New York at the time that she was there. She was very close friends with my roommate, and I certainly built a friendship with Grace. And so to know her journey, or to have witnessed it from one kind of space removed. She graduated in 2008, I graduated in 2009. So again, really seeing the journey of 10 years for her and what she's accomplished. There's no doubt in my mind that over the course of the next 5 years, 10 years, as we enter 2020, her dreams are in process right now. And we are really part of this moment to make hypnotherapy mainstream. Your next question, can you tell me about a situation in a previous job where you were asked to help on something or for someone when you were extremely busy? So in terms of the Steps to End Family Violence, that organization that Marlene and I worked on together, we held annual events for the women who are locked up. Every holiday season, we were able to get clearance to have a very intimate party for the women and their family, their children to come visit with them in a way that looked different than their traditional visits. So traditional visits, you can't have physical contact. It's not a fun vibe. It's certainly not a decorated visitation room. And we built trust with the wardens, with the head leadership of the jail, to frankly have clearance to do what we wanted to do. We brought food in, which also was pretty unheard of. We were able to have family members cook and cater the event. So the women who were locked up were able to get home cooked meals from their loved ones and get the tastes from home, right? Unfortunately, and the reality is the majority of the women who are locked up then and present day are women of color, marginalized women, indigenous women. I remember supporting a Samoan woman who had not had the traditional cooking of her family in the entirety of her jail sentence, right? And sometimes that could mean 3 years before these women were going to their trial. Many times they were found not guilty, right? And those 3 years were completely lost for their family time, their loved ones, their own purpose, right? Was just stuck in this time of their prison or incarceration. So to see women's eyes light up, their hearts light up, their bodies feel at home just from the food we were able to bring in. I give that background to say the holiday parties were, and they were also Mother's Day parties, were highlights of the year and also some of the most stressful times of our year, right? And so sometimes we're asked to hop on projects. Hey, can you cut out 30 cards that we're going to be using to decorate this space, and use very elementary decorations to make something feel like the most glamorous day of their year, right? And on top of your normal workload, on top of really long hours. I remember us having to frankly work like past midnight in advance of our holiday party one year. So being asked to hop on that and just do it with a smile, keep the bigger vision in mind, right? My little stressor for that day, that late night of Thursday, left an imprint on 50 plus hearts on that Friday, and it was worth it, right? And sometimes remembering that we need to stretch outside our comfort zones, outside our preferences, and knowing that the folks that we're supporting are being asked to do that every second of the day, right? So my few hours of discomfort is a sacrifice I'm willing to make, right? Can you tell me about a situation when you're asked to do something outside your immediate job description? I laughed when I saw that question, and I laughed because the thing that came to mind was working with interns. And I laughed because I guess in many ways I am virtually being an intern in this work study position. So interns, right, are some of the most precious reminders of what it felt like at the start of our careers. How wide-eyed, open-hearted, non-jaded, right, we were coming from. And at the same time, working with interns can be some of the more tedious, labor-intensive, to put it kind of bluntly, irritative kind of parts of the day where you're working with someone who is so temporary, right? And you know that you're investing a lot of time, resources, energy into folks that probably will not continue forward as full-time staff. And many times it feels like a brand new onboarding of folks, but you don't really get to reap longer term benefits. So at Step 10 Family Violence, we always had social workers, usually like about 3 social workers with us for the semester or sometimes the full year. And although I wasn't a supervisor, it was certainly expected indirectly and sometimes directly to be a guide for the interns, help them orient themselves in the work, let them shadow me in my process. And, you know, to this day, 10 years deep into my career, I don't love the journey of guiding interns. And at the same time, again, it's an opportunity to be in my practice, to humble myself, to remind myself that they're just as much as a teacher as I am to them, and to take that opportunity with patience, and with grace, right? Can you tell me about a time in a past job where work was stressful? So the most stressful moment was not the holiday party, it was not the Mother's Day event, but when we were beginning to prep a woman to go to trial. So in my 2 years, I think there was 3 different women that I supported leading up to their trial and through their trial. And then there's another woman who I was supporting leading up to her trial, and then I moved to Los Angeles before she went to trial. And it was Marlene who took over that case for me. And it was Marlene who saw that trial through. And I'm really happy to say that that woman beat her case, was found not guilty, and is thriving, just graduated from her undergrad this past spring. And yeah, different story. If I was asked a success story, I'd love to talk for minutes on her. But a stressful time, I would say, is being an anchor for another person when we know that her life is and her freedom is truly on the line. Being an anchor and being a bridge for that woman who's on the inside and her family, who we've gotten to know through the months of working with her, who's also relying on you, right? I was a legal advocate and a social emotional support person. And the legal advocacy job was something that filled in many of the gaps that the attorneys didn't have the capacity to fill. So we wrote psychosomatic reports, social emotional reports, basically telling the story of the woman who was going to trial for the attorney to really have the way to dig deeper, right? When that woman would go on the stand and be questioned by her attorney and by prosecution, that defense attorney learned more through the reports that I co-created with her than they did in the 2 years of being hired on as her personal attorney. So our jobs were really important. Sitting in the courtroom, watching this woman that you have built an intimate friendship with, sitting in a courtroom and watching her hear people tell really hard stories about her narrative, watching her be taken out of the back room in cuffs and sitting silently as people in positions of power talked over her, about her, as though she wasn't there. Sitting in the courtroom and feeling the tension between the family members of her past partner who used to abuse her, sitting in the courtroom of her family members who are holding back their grief, their rage, their confusion and pain, as they knew that so many other people had their loved ones' future in their hands. Those were the most stressful times, right, at the job. I learned how important self-care was. I went through a yoga teacher certification journey while I was working at that job. I do believe that that really helped me be more grounded when I showed up for other people. My inspiration for getting that teacher training certification was to bring yoga practice into the jail. And I think I brought it in any other moment, right? It wasn't just this, here I am teaching a class moment. It was, here I am sitting in the back of this courtroom, aligned with my breath, channeling in right from my heart center when I felt really nervous. There's a woman whose case we unfortunately lost, and she was sentenced to 7 years of prison. I remember that day really, really clearly, the day I left that courthouse and took the breath of lower Manhattan air and knew that I was free to go grieve and scream and cry on the Brooklyn Bridge, in Battery Park. And I knew in the jail cell, like the holding cell in that lower Manhattan courthouse where that young woman just lost her case, I knew that she was not going to feel that breath of freedom for over 7 years. She had a 2-year-old daughter. She had a sister. She had a mother. That was really painful and stressful. And I know that my colleagues were also going through similar journeys, right? So I had a set caseload. We were a team of 5 or 6. We all had about 15 or so women on our caseload, all kind of walking through a similar journey of stress, of victories, of defeat, right? Can you tell me about a time where you had multiple managers or team members who needed deliverables or responses from you at the same time? Just briefly to share, I reported to a social worker, right, Marlene, as a supervisor. I also reported to a woman named Martha, who was an attorney and our legal related supervisor. So I really had 2 full focal points of my job, 2 different threads of responsibilities that are reported to 2 different supervisors for. I also just want to highlight, I had to report to attorneys, external attorneys, whose mission was not the work that we had, right? Their mission was not finding alternatives to incarceration and restorative justice. Their defense attorney perspective was just, can I get my client off, right? And I often butted heads with the way these attorneys showed up to their clients, the women I was working with, the way these attorneys worked with the prosecutors, the judges. It was very hard to be both one foot on this paradigm of the traditional system and one foot, arm, all my other limbs, right? Like stretching to the other paradigm where, first of all, prison abolition is a norm, right? Where we are seeing folks from an abolitionist perspective. That's not the paradigm I was operating in. And so the dichotomy of working with those prison guards, correctional officers, attorneys, my bosses, it was every day was total different spectrum of philosophies and paradigms. What do you imagine grace-based hypnosis company culture is like? I imagine we are coming from a place of real discipline, of integrity, of doing the work ourselves. So having our own practice with hypnotherapy as much as possible so that when we're talking to folks who are interested on either joining the journey as students or interested in becoming customers of the online products of the store, that we can speak from the heart of our own experience. I imagine the company culture asks us to work at our best selves, right? Operating from that mode, from that vibration, being accountable to our colleagues, being accountable to being honest when we fall, right? Being honest when we need help. I think I look at this culture as showing up as though we are already at that place of the evolution we're seeking, right? And then being honest when we're not able to do that, or when we've noticed and been reflective, hey, that interaction I know felt icky or there was tension. Can we check in about it? Or I'm just not sure I fully understand. Can we carve some time to circle back and clear that cord so that we can work at our best and our optimal moving forward? So, thank you so much for hearing glimpses of my story. Thank you so much for the opportunity to consider me for this work study position. I very much look forward to next steps, and thank you again.